for this executive roundtable or executive workshop here for May and Gildre. Joe, I will let you kind of give yourself the intro and take it off from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And thanks for having me. I'm really excited to present this, and I think it'll be hopefully very valuable and impactful for everyone who's here. First of all, what are we here for? This is what I put together today is a little bit different probably than some presentations. It's really a toolkit. So there's lots of different strategies here. Hopefully there's some frameworks, hopefully things that are just really useful to you. There's going to be enough here that if something's sort of not sparking your interest, we'll move pretty quickly, and hopefully the next thing will be valuable and useful. So that's the style of this, is more toolkit. So we're going to move through relatively quickly and cover a lot of ground. And anything here that's in the toolkit, some of these things can be like whole day workshops. So we're gonna cover a lot of different and hopefully interesting things, but also there's a lot more to learn about many of these subjects. And what I'll offer is, let's go to the next slide. This here, bottom right, is what I look like on our Slack. So I'm available to talk about any of these things anytime. I'm an advisor here with Gildre, and I've actually had a lot of great conversations with other members. So you can find me on LinkedIn here. This is what I look like. You can find me on our Slack directly. So if you have any questions about anything that we cover today, do feel free to engage me to discuss more. I love everything that we're going to cover today is sort of near and dear to my heart and has helped me and helped others that I've worked with. So a little bit of background on me. I'm a nurse, 20 years, hospital executive, lots of burnout in healthcare, in particular nurses, doctors, anesthesiologists. So lots of work with people, helping solve burnout in healthcare, lots of support. When I worked at Stanford, we had several different programs, some of which you'll see some of the more useful tactics in this deck related to some of the things that we studied and found at Stanford. So that's sort of the background on me and why me. I've also just sort of a founder background. My wife and I have a holding company with 12 different businesses ranging from e-commerce, restaurants, services businesses. I have a coaching business as well. So one of the things we've had to figure out is some of the things in this deck, how to be available and responsible for many things while still keeping, a lot of different sort of things going. So I've also scaled up a venture-backed startup in healthcare in the software space from 20 people to a few hundred. So I had lots of different experiences around, growing businesses and what it takes to do that successfully. I'll just go back to the opener a little bit for those that are joining. Oftentimes, the people who are striving the most, that really are aiming the highest, also are the ones that have the greatest falls and have, really do suffer from burnout. We'll talk about the mechanisms of that as we work through this, but it's us, you're here, I'm here, we're all trying to learn and grow, but it's often us, the high achievers, the people that are really pushing, that really do get drained by how hard we push ourselves, usually. Sometimes pushed by others, but almost always pushed by ourselves. So we're going to dive into this a little bit here. There really is an epidemic of stress and an epidemic of loneliness. You see some of these highlights here. A couple of things to point out here is actually a lot of people are acting on the fact that life is more stressful now. You'll see that 70% of people are trying to do something about it. So hopefully, you're already in that realm of people that if you're feeling stressed, you have tools. And we'll talk more about what those tools are and can be as we move along. It is important to note that millennials and Gen Z are more affected. I think the more you're sort of in the digital realm and how fast things are moving and how sort of tuned in you are, that is a sort of a predictor of stress and burnout. So some prevalent causes of stress and burnout. These are all just, sort of life and what it takes to navigate life, normal life things. What's interesting is as founders and as people who are builders, we have all these things, right? Almost everything that you see here, we need to navigate that, right? But we have additional things, at least 7 more things that we can sort of add on to the stressors that most people would list in their lives. So we have workloads that are often quite different than, sort of a jobby job. A lot of times we're not in control. Like we're trying to enter a market or build something for a market and for customers that are sort of bringing something new to the world by definition. We are going to talk more about work-life balance. I actually think work-life balance is a bit of a misnomer, but that's how it's talked about in our society. So I wanted to bring that sort of vocabulary in here, but we're going to talk about probably a better way to think about it versus like work-life. We'll talk about an integrated model a little bit today. And then we have obviously the day-to-day concerns of rent and, needing to live somewhere and have a car and insurance and all those things. But then we add as builders all the pressures of, a team that we're responsible for, fundraising, our runway, things like that. So we're sort of hard mode on the financial side and bringing in a lot of complexity. An interesting one for founders is vision and reality misalignment. So by definition, if you're thinking about building something and bringing something into the world, you're living in the future. I think something that I've realized about myself when I sort of self-assess, my whole world lives in the future. And I have team members that live in the day-to-day, but a lot of my job is to look out onto the horizons and bring people sort of with me into that future. So just by definition, we're often living in a place where the real world isn't yet. And that creates a lot of stress. And sometimes I think is sort of the big one that I see that's sort of misdiagnosed or missed by people, is this idea that when you live in the future and you're building something into the future, that brings with it just inherently a different type of stress than many people are dealing with in their day-to-day lives when they can live more in the present. This often leads to neglecting self-care. If I just do one more thing, if I stay up a little later, if I just, do more, we'll talk more about this, then we can sort of make this happen. I need to do it for the team, for the customers, for the investors. And sometimes it feels like we have support, but the support that we have isn't on a personal level. It's, hey, we have investors. We can turn to them if something's going on in the business. We have a board, but oftentimes we don't have people who we can turn to on a very personal level. And so that loneliness is really even exacerbated in the founder world. So again, I'm going to move relatively quickly. We're going to cover a lot of ground, but if you have questions, we have room for that. So I'm going to, again, just like sort of keep moving through these, but at the end, feel free to take a note or put it into the chat. If it's timely, topical, and it's in the chat, I'll try to grab it, but otherwise we'll keep question and answers towards the end. So there will be time for that. All right. So just some roots of burnout. Oftentimes we have perfectionism. We feel like we need to solve everything. So we have a high bar for our team and even higher for ourselves. And that keeps us from getting help, from getting other people to do work with us. We often overcommit. We say, hey, yes, we can do it. It can be done. I can do it. Our team can do it. It's not realistic. Super common to see. If you just think of Jira tickets or other ticketing systems, it's really common to see people with like hundreds of tickets, things, different tasks that need to be done that fit into larger projects, but could never actually be done, in the time that we've set aside for it and the timelines we've set. So overcommitment, very common. Not embracing diversity. There's lots of ways of thinking about diversity, but what I mean here is diversity very globally. Different people work different ways. Different people can handle different workloads. Different people can handle different types of work. Sometimes they can handle overcommitment if it's a certain type of work that fits their, sort of work profile and their superpowers. So sometimes you see this idea of like a 10x individual. What happens with those people is they've figured out what their zone of genius is, what their superpowers are. They can do a lot more than other people. So when you find the right fit, you can go sometimes from overcommitment to embracing diversity and figuring out what people really can do 10x more of than other people. We'll dive more deeply on this, but there's a whole way of thinking about diversity, which is not limited. It's very broad. And when you think about diversity very open-mindedly, you can start to think about each individual and how different people are and try to match up different types of work with diverse superpowers. And so we'll dive into that a little more deeply. And then because of these things, perfectionism, overcommitment, and not really embracing diversity with a really open aperture, it's a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity to tap into and empower a team. And when I say team here, I mean team very broadly. It can be advisors that you work with. It can be a team that you're building, sort of an employees W-2 kind of setup. It can be, maybe you have an agency that you work with. That can be part of your team. It can be peers. So also think very broadly about what team means and how you empower the people in your life to help fix this and set you up for success related to this burnout cycle that can develop. So some signs that you're experiencing burnout, there's many, but these are some of the most common ones in particular that I've seen in my clients. Too many commitments. There's this idea of feeling lost and this sort of idea of chaos, and that the world is kind of happening to you at this point and that you've just really lost control. When that happens, what you see a lot of times is like a lack of joy. People that just sort of can't make a joke, can't take a joke. And in particular, people that maybe used to bring humor in and sort of, have that as a part of their life and a part of their sort of even the culture that they've helped create, but they or you no longer have that as part of what they're able to access because sort of the aperture has gotten really small related to stress. Then there's other ways that you see this personality contraction. So it can mean not engaging. It can mean, lots of different things, where there's someone with sort of a certain full personality, or you feel like you have that, but you feel like you're sort of missing pieces, or you see other people missing pieces. That can be a real signal that either they're in burnout or headed towards burnout. So there's again, a lot here, and there's a whole world of how to sort of tell burnout, but these are some of the sort of easier ones to see in yourself. If you're having these signs, it's sort of a yellow to red flags. Then these are other things that you see happening when you're entering burnout, is you start to really reduce perspective. Things start to look more risky. You start to say, hey, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that, because the stress is making you sort of locked down. Then that leads to disengagement, not just with people, but participation in tasks, showing up for huddles, in the Zoom, but the video's off, that kind of thing. And all those things just add up to underperformance. Like you're not operating at your full potential, and you're not able to work as a team member when you're sort of in this mode. So just some things to watch out for, and then sort of the outcomes that you see when this starts to happen. We're going to go from sort of easy, simple concepts to dive into some more deeper concepts. So some of the early things to do is just see what your triggers are, and then give yourself permission to have a reset and just say, okay, like I feel like, my world's sort of getting smaller. I'm stressed. I can't take on more. I'm sort of shutting down. That's an opportunity to reset. And sometimes reset just means go for a walk, or breathe deeply 10 times, or something just like really simple to help yourself reset. But what it also means is you need to look at what's setting, getting those triggers into motion and bringing them into your life, and take more global action on solving for those things. So, triggers can be relatively small, but also happening often. Sometimes they're bigger. So, you've got to sort of look on different axes there. Small things happening more often, sort of chronic, can lead to burnout and sort of a high stress feeling. But then also big events, like whenever I have a board meeting coming, I feel stressed out and I sort of lock down. So taking action to figure out what those things are, and then make sure that you address them, is a big part of what we're going to jump into today. So Brian, I see your question about highs and wins and balancing stress and burnout. I think it's true that we have sort of almost euphoric moments that come as founders, a great board meeting, a fundraising round, bringing a feature or something about our product into the market. Those are highs that like other people just don't experience. And so it's almost true by definition that entrepreneurship and being founders brings highs that you just can't access any other way. But it also brings with it these outsized responsibilities of team and finance and the other things we had on some of these slides. So I would say, speaking for myself and clients and sort of the world that I've seen, a telltale sign is that people come back. They have an exit, let's say. They think, oh, they've done great. They made all their money. Now they're going to go on a boat and chill out. that's they do that, but they usually come back from the boat trip and find another way to contribute to society, to build a team, to do the next thing. There's very few examples of founders that just sort of tap out after they've sort of achieved success. And I think that's a pretty big tell that the rewards outweigh the risks and the stress. We all sort of come back. So I think that says a lot in itself. And so that's my take, at least, is that yes, it's worth it, and yes, the highs are sort of more than the costs. So that's one perspective, but I think each person has their individual experience. All right, we'll keep sort of moving along here. So starting to get into for more complex tips and tools. So one of the most important things here is discovering your superpowers and the superpowers of people around you. There's a great book about Zone of Genius, and if you look at the left foursquare there, it says, "What work do you love doing that doesn't seem like work?" It's oftentimes really easy for us to overlook our zone of genius because we're like, well, that's not even work. I love to do it. When I do it, I just sort of get it done really quickly. And so we diminish oftentimes our most impactful contribution because it's easy for us. This is like the number one thing that I see with people when they're suffering from burnout. They've diminished their superpower and they've latched onto oftentimes the zone of excellence. And let's talk a little bit about what the difference are. So zone of excellence is, hey, I'm better than anyone else at this. I get it done. They give it to me. I get it done. It didn't take me very long. That's like what I should be doing, is things like that. The thing that's missing is, in your zone of genius, a couple of things. One is you do it even if you weren't paid or didn't have rewards to do it. It almost feels sort of like hobby-ish. And the other one is you lose track of time. If you find yourself doing work and you're in your flow state, that's almost always a sign that you're in your zone of genius, or you're developing that as a superpower. So when you get into that mode of, hey, I'd do this for free, I'd love to learn about this, I would do this and learn about it for a lifetime, and I can lose track of time when I'm doing it, you're probably in your zone of genius. I see so many people diminish their zone of genius and latch on to their zone of excellence. Like, oh, I love doing Excel spreadsheets. I'm good at it. When I see other people doing it, I'm sort of suffer. They don't understand the shortcuts and all these, like ways of, using the keyboard to do things quickly, all that. So they get stuck over there in zone of excellence because it sort of feels good. The team needs it, and they miss out on their zone of genius and their real superpower. So this is probably the most common thing that I see people doing as it relates to sort of burnout, is treading, sort of like hamster wheeling in the world of excellence and missing out on really tapping into where their genius is. And Victor, I love your point. People are conditioned to value hard work and suffering. So they come over to zone of excellence and be like, I'm doing work. I'm, like doing all this paperwork. I'm getting this stack down, right? And it can feel, good and satisfying, but it is not their zone of genius. And they're not in that place where they can tap into lifelong learning and flow state and all the other things that really do serve us, in particular as entrepreneurs. So some things just to think about to help you develop your superpowers. One, just embrace them, find them and embrace them. Be self-aware, find an environment that supports you in it. Oftentimes as founders, we have a lot more control than we think we do. We think, oh, like I should be the one who does payroll, slog it out, right? But maybe there's someone else on the team that is trustworthy and would be doing payroll, and you get to work more in your zone of genius. Then just, small wins. Sometimes these things, they take time. You set your schedule up a certain way, it gets messed up again, but one day you sort of get it right and feel like the day really flowed. Celebrate that day, right? Like you got that right. It worked. You were able to be in your zone of genius for, a few times in one day. That's a kind of progress. Like that's a positive thing to celebrate. So some people, you like chocolate and keep a little chocolate around, but you don't access it unless you do the things that you're trying to set up for a good system for yourself. So you can do little tiny even rewards, and that can make a big difference. So this is for you and for team members. If you're a leader, you can help your people also be in their superpowers, identify them, align tasks with them. So we'll talk more about that as we go along here. Second failure mode I see super common is just this sort of me thing, right? We want excellence. We think we're the only ones who can do it. We don't break free from this cycle, and we get caught in this burnout trap. Just 1,000 things coming our way, and we think we're the only ones who can solve it. What I see is when leaders identify their own superpowers, match their work with them, and then identify their team members, again, broadly team, doesn't necessarily have to be like people that work for you, with you, but people in your life, right? When you can start to see their superpowers as well and match those with things that need to get done, you actually see real excellence. You see teams that get in this positive loop of everyone working in their zone of excellence. It doesn't have to be all the time, but your core work matches up with what you're really great at. That's where you see things, people not feeling burnt out no matter almost how much work they do because of the matching component here, but also a lot more can get done because of the matching of their 10x capabilities. So sort of getting out of the, I need to solve it, it's all about me. Again, a little simpler, but just saying no for the company, saying no for yourself, thinking about, sort of email. We're going to talk more about email in just a second, but using email as an example, what's there that you really need to do? And we're going to talk about how to prioritize in a moment, process the things that need to get done in email and other ways, but this idea of batching, we're going to talk a little bit more about, and then reframing expectations of people around you. Like some emails do need to be responded to very quickly, but others can wait like a week or maybe forever. So give yourself permission to say no and to act on that to set up your work for success and also the work of others. So just diving a little deeper on email, just very simply, come in 1 or 2 times a day, look at your email, what's important, what's not. You don't have to get everything to 0 in that moment, but just what's important. I think a lot of people who have figured out email quite successfully do it 1 or even 2 times a day, and that's it. It's not like always on. There's sort of a trope, especially in startup world, like instantly responding to emails matters a lot. I haven't seen that to necessarily be true. Most emails, awareness of them as they're coming up is helpful, but really managing email 1 or 2 times a day with a more weekly triage to sort of get everything handled is often really the right way to do things. And something you often will find in email is it's sort of a hot thing right now at, let's say, 10 a.m., but by 1 p.m. it's already solved. And if you jump on it at 10, you just got another piece of work for yourself. And you also sort of took away the team's ability and you sort of taught them that they should email you and you're immediately going to respond to it. And if you keep teaching people that way, they're going to email you a lot. Or if you let people know there's going to be a little bit of lag time, oftentimes they'll sort of solve things themselves. So there's an art to that, but I do think giving ourselves permission to wait and to give time for things to get solved can be quite helpful. Sort of lifestyle integration. This is where we're talking about work-life balance. I believe it's different than that as well. It's really integrating those things. It's like, okay, especially as we have work from home now, oftentimes we can get more done in a day than we would have done if we went into, let's say, the office, but it's work now and then some kid stuff or family stuff then, and and the same thing on the weekend. So this idea of sort of integrating versus work life, I think is working well for many people. You have to discuss it and you have to have expectations around it and you have to be clear about it. I'd say the failure mode I see here in lifestyle integration is the need to sort of obfuscate what the schedule looks like and be like, oh, I have a really important meeting at that time. But just say, hey, family's a priority for me and I help, I pick up my kids from school and that needs to happen at that time, but I can get this done at this other time. Just be open about it. And I think people are really willing to accept that. And it's becoming more and more true all the time. And then just sort of streamlining your work to fit life into it. And then creating space. These are just small things, having a lunch hour and blocking that off on your calendar seems small, and make it an hour. Like people think, oh, lunch, 15 minutes. I'm taking that time away from work. But, maybe you can pick up your dry cleaning or something else during that time and actually get your life handled. Weekend work, I don't think it's generally realistic to have the whole weekend off, but capping what you get done or setting goals for the weekend versus just like letting work just creep in. Again, it's about, sort of clarity on what your expectations are for yourself and others. And people do pay attention to us as leaders. So think about what you do and then how it affects the team as well. Setting boundaries sort of fits in with that. I want to talk a little bit about types of days. I'm cognizant of time here. We're at 30 minutes. Probably going to work through like 2 more frameworks and then show a bunch of slides that are maybe helpful, and then we can get into discussion mode. I just want to make sure there's time for that.
Yeah, I think if you want to save like at least 5 minutes for questions at the end, and that way you can feel free to run through as much over the next 5-10 minutes as you can.
Okay, sounds good. Maybe I'll go 10 minutes and then 5 minutes for questioning. I think I can wrap it up in 10, cover everything. All right, so this is something called the entrepreneurial time system. If you Google it, you'll find there's a whole world there of how people are doing this. But what it's about, and we're going to dive a little deeper into smaller chunks in a minute, but it's about setting up days for different types of activity. So I won't read everything that's on this slide, but if you think about like, this is a day where I add value to clients and to our team. This is a day where I set aside for deep work and focus. And then this is a type of day that I set aside to be completely free. So what I recommend for my clients in my practice is at least 1 day a week where they're completely tapped out of work. So again, integration, something may need to get done, but really trying to achieve at least 1 free day in a week is important, and it's incredibly impactful and valuable. And then thinking about the other days of work so that they have these themes, including setting time aside for focus. I've also seen whole companies that use this model that say like, hey, we do have expectations that there's work done on Saturdays and Sundays, but we set aside Fridays, or we protect Saturdays, or whatever it ends up being. But if you can get a company on a system like this where people know that they can expect an almost completely focused day on a certain day a week, they can expect not to be interrupted on another day a week, and you can get a company working on a system like this, it's incredibly impactful. And it solves for some of the hybrid work. Why did I come in the office to be on Zoom all day? When you can set the themes up in a company so that people know that these are the meeting days and these are the free days and these are the days where people do focused work, it can be incredibly impactful. And it works especially well in the sort of hybrid distributed world that we have now. So within the themes of the days, some concepts that work really well for people is having 4 quarters in a day. Sometimes days just like start off wrong and you're just like, this day is done. Like it's not going to work. But if you think about like, okay, that was just the first quarter. Like that was the morning didn't go well, but I'm going to sort of regain traction before lunch and I'm going to get this done before lunch. That's a winnable quarter. So like quarter 2 of the day, those 2 hours are incredibly valuable, even though I started off on the wrong sort of like leg here. If you see some people who do this well, they'll sort of have like their day set up. So it's like, oh, team in the morning. And then I do my work, in this quarter, I work out in this quarter, I do this thing in this quarter of the day. So oftentimes, even if you can't get your sort of week set up with certain themes in the day, you can get your day set up in quarters, and you can do this in real time. Like oftentimes it's sort of like self-coaching. You're like, all right, back in the game, this is going to work, and you can win that quarter. So it's just a sort of a mental model that can help get back on track if things have somehow slipped. Then Pomodoro, I think probably in this world, it's probably not a new concept, but you can even break those quarters down into smaller pieces. Like we're going to get this task done in this time, and I'm going to allocate this amount of time to that, and I'm going to stay really focused during that time. And then taking breaks. There's so many people that, get up early, push really hard all day, go to bed late, energy drinks, coffee, the whole thing. And the science doesn't support that. Science says more like the Pomodoro way. That's not just supported by outcomes, it's supported by like deep scientific work on how humans are productive, that breaks are incredibly important. Some of the work that we did in healthcare showed us that when people work 10 hours or longer, Stanford did several studies around this. When you're working more than 10 hours or longer, it's actually very similar. It's like the 10th to 11th hour is like you had a drink, 11th to 12th hour, 2 drinks. So basically, you're sort of starting to work like an idiot, someone who's sort of like purposefully being less productive as you go beyond 10 hours of focused work. So it's really just doesn't work. And so if you find yourself doing that, working really long hours, using caffeine or maybe other things to help you sort of stay going, if you're doing that longer than plus or minus 8 to 10 hours, your diminishing returns on that time actually would have been better use of your time to go take a break, and in particular take a 30-minute nap, was some of the things that we found really worked well in those studies. So just something to keep in mind. If you're pushing yourself really hard over a longer time frame, breaks can be really important and valuable. So this is getting into some of the really powerful but harder work, which is creating a culture of empowerment within your team. So I'm just going to skip right to delegation and what we're talking about here. When you identify your own strengths and identify strengths of team members, you redefine success. That part of it is learning, teaching, helping others develop their strengths and passions, building trust in your team, giving them more responsibilities. This helps everyone with burnout and reducing stress. So how to do that? Think about prioritization. Think about what's actually important to be done and what is urgent. Both those things need to get done, and oftentimes by you. They're critical, they're urgent, they're time sensitive. That box in the upper left hand, it's you, it's us as founders, leaders, owners to do those things in the upper left. But oftentimes there's things that are not urgent, still important. You can put them further out on your calendar. Not important. I want to make a clarification here. When I see these, I always sort of like prickle a little bit, because they say, oh, like low value items, delegate them, right? That's flawed. And the reason why it's flawed is they may be low value to you, but they're high value to another person. And in fact, that's like the big secret of success with delegation is find the things that you might not be successful at doing that might not seem valuable to you, but go find someone who loves that stuff and is like really driven by it. And if you go back to this sort of perfectionism that can drive us, you'll find that oftentimes they outperform you and you're getting 110% than if you would have done it yourself. So this is a relatively common sort of construct. And I have that one thing that sort of to call out. There's a better way to think about it than low value. It's not the right fit for you, but it can be a very high value task and high chance of success for someone else. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about this. This one, I think I'll move quickly through a couple of these, but how I have built part of this practice is based on nursing and healthcare in general. So it's scientific process, what works, things like that. So again, you can revisit this. We can talk more on Slack about it. There are many versions of giving away responsibility. These are just a few of the systems that have been studied, some as recently as 2003. I have chosen this model to work with my clients on and found it to be really successful. When you're working with people on delegation, start at the bottom. But almost by definition, this is something that's new for them. So just very clearly talk about what you like to be done, how you'd like it to be done, the timeline, all those kind of things. Then you can start to move up. A huge failure mode of empowerment, delegation, and the whole trust component of it is people just go right to the top. They say, I want you to take care of this. And they've never tested that out with that person before, etc. So do work your way up this ladder of building trust with people. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that. Again, healthcare, nursing, we have something called the 5 rights of delegation. So think through what is a complete way to communicate what I'm asking this person to do, and include supervision forever. No matter how high the trust is, there's always the chance that as a leader, we are going to need to intervene. So how are you going to stay connected with, sort of the milestones of the project and making sure it's staying on track? It's almost never true that you just abdicate completely from whatever it is that you're delegating. So this is something that's true in healthcare and in nursing, but it really works for founders as well. So again, so much to dive into here. Happy to unpack it more with you, but sort of keep moving. investing time up front to explain the project completely and thoroughly. No matter what level you're at with trust, people need clarity. They need a complete ticket. They need all those things I just showed you on the last slide to be able to be successful. If you miss any one of these things, if you get the person wrong, if you get it a right person, but you've got the wrong workload, or you get the workload right and the sort of, hey, this person can do it, but it's actually not like the right type of work for them, that's another miss. So there's any one of these pieces. If you miss a component here, it can be a real miss for the handoff and for the feeling of empowerment and building more trust over time. So sort of a template to think about as you're going through this for yourself is, I have my superpowers. I have an idea of what my team members are. Just get a piece of paper, write down several columns, and there's things you want to do. I'm going to focus on these things. You can reaffirm that with people. Hey, I'm doing these things. I'm going to make sure it's going to happen. I'm going to put it onto my calendar, because inevitably you might have been slipping too, and people may not sort of trust that everything that's on your plate is going to get done. So there's sort of a recommitment component. Then there's things that you know probably aren't going to get done. You need to renegotiate those things. You need to apologize for the fact that those things have not been getting done, and you know it and they know it. So surface them, communicate about them, and then look at the right column. There's some things that just need to go. They're not going to happen. And then other things that you need help with, and you need to talk with team members about taking on and developing their skill set around them. So communication around your own work related to your superpowers, your team superpowers, and delegation is really critical, and also a place that sometimes missed. People do this work themselves, but then don't do the communication piece. So I think that's probably the right place to sort of wrap it and go into questions. There's a concept of rocks and sand, which is make sure the big responsibilities that you have get done first and put onto your schedule first. Then you can put the sand into the jar, the small things. It's the whole culture of sort of being thoughtful about these things. And then living the life that you've earned. Once you do this well, there's a very different lifestyle on the other side of this that doesn't lead to burnout. So let's open it up to questions. I know I unloaded a lot here and wanted to get a lot of different tools and frameworks out to you, but what popped for you? What questions do you have?
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks so much, Joe. If you have questions, feel free to, you can just unmute yourself, chat. You can use the chat box to obviously ask something too. And I'll ask the first one really quick, and I think people will kind of jump in after, is regarding different. So like, let's say most people here on, on their core startup, maybe they also work another job. Maybe they have multiple startups. Like you said, you've got a portfolio with 12 different businesses in it. How do you balance that? Whether it's, it's hard enough doing it with your own company, managing with personal and family and all that. How do you find doing that with multiple companies, maybe multiple startups and a full-time job, different things like that? How does that affect the burnout versus kind of one role?
Yeah, great. Yeah, so diverse expectations, many bosses, dragged by the market if you have a startup, that kind of thing. What I would say, there's a concept of leading from the mezzanine, but then also needing to come down onto sort of the show floor. And I think it's trying to be in the mezzanine as much as possible, which means having the perspective of being able to see the work and seeing all the moving parts and seeing how it all fits together, but then very quickly going down to like the show floor when something demands your attention, which means that it is your superpower, something you can solve 10x better than anyone else. If you can be in the mezzanine, sort of take a report, help someone else solve it, and then they go back down to the show floor, that means you get to stay involved with, let's say, 12 different businesses, or two, sort of W2 plus founder, right? So I think there's this idea of constantly trying to climb the ladder yourself to be able to have the mezzanine viewpoint, but also being willing and ready to go down onto the show floor for your 10x stuff at any given moment. And so like for me, an example might be one of our restaurants robbed and the POS is stolen, and that restaurant can't open at 10 a.m. until we get another POS there, until I hook that up to the bank, which I do not trust anyone else to do, right? So I'm not being a board member of the restaurant group. I'm getting the window fixed. I'm getting the money sort of hooked up so that machine can pump again. So I think it's this understanding of when do I need to be on the business versus in the business, and always trying to sort of climb back up the ladder.
All right, looks like we got a question from Olga too. So Joe, I don't know if you see that one.
Yeah, I'm going to say something maybe healthcare people generally would disagree with, but nicotine is a tool, right? And cigarettes are a tool. And I would often have many nurses that smoked, and it is fascinating. I love that you asked this question. The nurses who smoked, who went out and took these breaks, they had camaraderie, they'd go out a few people at a time. Those were the most chill nurses that could handle the most stress. And I think the cigarette is sort of like, we're sort of down on tobacco. And I think if you smoke a lot, you're going to die probably. Your chances are much higher. But I think this concept of, you smoke, someone else is smoking. There's two people now. That's a certain type of break. Cigarettes sort of are on it. They get you're on a driven timeline. You're going to go get another cigarette in a few hours, right? So it's a fascinating thing. I'm not going to make a comment on should people never smoke or whatever, but I can say if I had a group of 200 nurses and there were 6 who smoked, the nurses who could handle the heavy duty stuff were the smokers, interestingly enough. And my belief around that is that they had consistent breaks. They had camaraderie. They would go out and complain together about the stuff that was going on because the other people were on a similar sort of clock and rhythm related to, going out and smoking together. So I'm not advocate of chain smoking or anything like that, but I would say the mechanism of taking breaks regularly, of finding other people to sort of commiserate with and all that can be quite healthy for people.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate the content and everything, Joe. We're at time here, so I want to make sure everyone kind of gets back. Carol, did you maybe have one last question? I didn't want to. Oh no.
Yeah. I don't know if don't we have time?
If we're at time, so if anyone needs to hop, you're more than welcome to. I think otherwise, hopefully, we have time for one more question. But Carol, if you wanted to ask, go ahead. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask Jonathan, in his experiences, what are the most common limiting beliefs that make people keep burning out or keep pursuing even though they already know that harms them?
It's perfectionism, and I have to do it myself. So the thing that we see over and over is that if you really are a perfectionist and you want the best outcome, you need to empower other people. It's somewhat counterintuitive, but it really is teams that identify their own superpowers and share that with each other, and everybody's working on their 10x stuff. That's where the magic happens. If you look at Netflix and other places that have clearly just outperformed, especially in the early days, it's clarity on superpowers and the goal and unleashing a whole team to do that. So if you think me, I have to solve everything, and the only way it can be solved is by me because I'm a perfectionist and I'm the only one who can do it right, you're almost certainly wrong. You just need to find the other team member who can do it even better than you. And as a perfectionist, you're going to be like, that's amazing. It's objectively better. And now they're doing it and not me. So if you can sort of disambiguate that I have to do it, and when I do it, it's better than everyone else, that uncoupling is a huge unlock as far as self-limiting beliefs.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, hey, thank you so much again, Joe. Thank you everyone for joining. Joe, is there any way we'll have this recording go out? Are you able to share the presentation and the templates?
Yep.
Perfect. So
what's the best way? Do you want me just to put it in Slack below the event?
Yeah, or you can even send it to me, and we can put it up also as part of the Gildre resources.
I'll send it to you.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. But again, thank you so much. This will be recorded out and shared. But again, if you have any questions, as Joe said, you can reach out to him directly through Slack, on LinkedIn. And Joe, thank you again for sharing your insights. It's certainly appreciated.
Thanks for having me, and looking forward to talking to anyone about any of these things or anything that I can help you with. Have a great one.
Amazing. All right, take care, everyone.
Bye.